This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. The message today is brought to you by Respectonomics by Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics. Normally, Sarah Benton would be with us, and she's regrettably not available today. And this is a continuation of the Living Asset series, and we're focusing on a sub-series, if you will, called the Kleenex Factor. Kleenex Factor is a way of looking at how corporations like to make sure that the information they receive is sanitized and clean and so on, which to some extent is reasonable. However, we've also pointed out that every corporation, like the human body, needs to be checked over, like you go for a doctor's medical check, and you go once a month, or once a year. And the reason for this particular one is what we're looking at is we've looked at the body in relation to the idea that when we go for a medical checkup, we think of looking at the brain, we think of looking at the lungs, and we look at the various components and hearts of our being and organs of our being. And what's important here is we've already in 2 previous episodes, we have looked at the composition of the human body as it relates to the brain, which we call the chief executive officer. And we've looked at the soul of the corporation, which we believe is embodied in the direction and the policies set forth by the board of directors. The part of the body we want to look at today is probably the most important one for the majority of people. And if you're hearing this message, this discussion, you may wish to pass it up and down the line, because we're talking about employees. The vast majority of us are employees, and if not directly employees, we would say we are indirectly employees, but we are nonetheless employees. And as employees, we are able to ask one fundamental question: how do we fit into the human body if we use the body as being the parallel to the corporation? And we've said this before, we'll say it again. The concept of the body and the corporation is to align ourselves with the reality that the body, the corpus, is the origin of the word corporation. Corpus, the body. So in other words, when we look at a corporation, we have every intellectual reason, moral reason, if you will, but commercial reason to look at the functionality of the corporation in the way one would look at a human body. And what we're looking at this time is, we've said already, we're looking at the employee, but we're looking at the heart. Now, the heart of a corporation is, in fact, the employee or the collective employees. And before we go any further, it's kind of interesting that the word for heart in Latin is cor, C-O-R, core, the central being. And then, of course, we have the word for the body, which is corpus, C-O-R-P-U-S. And so in other words, heart and corporation have the same root. And we believe that the corporation is effectively rooted in the employee. The employee, the staff, the people that, shall we say, do the work, they are the heart of the business. When you look at the heart, then let's just take a look at the heart. And there's a number of characteristics about it. I think the first one is its rhythmical nature. The heart goes, there's proper technical words for this, but in essence, what it does, it goes beep, rest, beep, rest. And that cycle, that rhythm continues. And as we all know, all the science shows that the amount of blood that is moved by the heart in a period of 24 hours is utterly amazing. The number of times the heart beats over its lifetime is extraordinary. But what we're talking about here is basically the concept of beep and rest. And beep and rest is very important because in a corporation, the employee, we always think in terms of the employee being in the beep mode. We also need to be very aware that the employee needs rest. And rest is not a word where you say, oh, I'm sitting down watching television. Rest is where you're given the opportunity to relax, to set yourself apart from the corporation. And it sounds almost like one's being sort of patronizing, one's saying, oh, it's, give the employee all they want. The truth of the matter is the body needs rest, the heart proves it, and the employee needs rest. So we just want to be putting that on the table. The next thing about a heart is it's reflexive. What I mean by that is if we suddenly go into a burst of running or a burst of exercise or something, the heart speeds up. It's very reflexive. It adapts to the conditions that are required of it. And so do employees. I think we should be very mindful of the responsive, reflexive nature of an employee. And candidly, I think we should be very grateful for that. Because if the employee can't, as it were, rise to the occasion or fall back out of the equation sometimes, whatever that equation is or looks like, the fact is that employee is almost the central nervous arrangement by which we respond, the employee responds to the needs of the corporation. It's an amazing function. The fact is that the heart is, you'd almost say, without it, we don't exist. And of course, somebody will say, well, there's always artificial means. Excluding the artificiality of replacing the heart is the center of the human being. It's often said, the heart of the matter, the heart of the organization. And when we think of that, the heart that we're talking about is the employee. And I think it's very important that we recognize that that heart is the employee and that the employee is literally acknowledged as such. Now, the problem with the heart is, as we all know in our own personal lives, is the heart can be, in fact, generally speaking, and actually for fairly good reasons, it's out of sight. You don't actually look at your heart in the morning and say, hello, there's my heart. No, you look at your heart in a sort of, there's some scientific or neural way of, not neural, what's the word? Scientific anyway, way of x-rays and whatever, looking at your heart. And all of those techniques are wonderful. But for us personally, individually, we in fact accept our heart. It's out of sight. It's out of mind. And it's incredibly efficient because not only is it reflexive, but it does something else. It's working while we're sleeping. It's working while we're not even thinking about it. So it has a tremendous sense of support built into it. The heart allows us to continue in a sense that we don't even think about it. And therein lies the risk. When something is out of sight and works nicely, it's rather easy just to set it aside and think, oh, well, that works. But how many studies have we seen, read, heard about that talk about the care for the heart? And we talk about what kind of foods we should be using, what kinds of drinks, what kinds of exercise, and all of these kinds of things. I'm not talking about the heart that is experiencing literally a DNA kind of problem. I'm talking about the heart in a sort of conventional sense that we are reminded constantly to look after it. And that concept of looking after it, so whether it's the right food, the right drink, the right atmosphere, the right tensions, all of those things, those are considerations that should be made very apparent to every employee, that they are being cared for, that there's every attempt to ensure that the toxins or the things that could be damaging to the health of the heart are in fact not in sight. They're not going to happen. I think it's an important part of the employee relationship. So what we're looking at here, let's just recoup a little bit. The heart is out of sight, in a sense it's out of mind. It is essential to the livingness, to the nature of our being. It beeps, it rests, it is extraordinarily responsive and reflexive, and it is a powerhouse. And it lasts incredibly well. There's actually no piece of machinery that matches it. I reckon that pretty much sums up the nature of the employee. And we as employees need to recognize that we are the heart of the organization. We should dignify ourselves with that knowledge. And of course, from a managerial point of view, supervisory, from the standpoint of the support mechanisms in our organizations to understand the incredible value of the employee. Now, there is one thing that we talk about. We talk about the efficiency of the heart, which in a sense we take for granted. I think most of us are very aware that when a heart is deficient, that is when all the alarm bells go off. We become very frightened. We look for support from many different corridors. We wonder what we've done, what we can do, what our longevity is going to look like, and so on. So the concept of deficiency is also a very valuable insight again into the relationship the employee has with the organization. Because there are times when an employee feels or is in fact deficient, not able to do the job properly. And if you think of your own your own personal body, you'll do everything you can to go to the doctors and the specialists and the cardiac specialists to see what needs to be done. Well, the same thing applies in the corporate world. When somebody is, shall we say, let's loosely say, falling behind, if it's a heart kind of issue in the way we've just described it, it does need great attention, and it is the responsibility of the corporation in a supervisory capacity building manner to accommodate that, to help that individual through that particular phase of deficiency. We just mentioned the word building capacity. One of the things, if you talk to the athletic world, they will talk about how the exercise and the aerobics and all this kind of thing are designed to build capacity. And every corporation needs to build capacity. And building the capacity of your heart is analogous, of course, to building the capacity of your employee. And it happens in a way of regular exercise. It happens there are different applications or different processes to build capacity for the heart. But that same building capacity needs to be ingrained in the organization. That if we have employees, we want to build capacity and need to think of ways, whether it's in education, whether it's in small groups, whether it's in literally paying attention to the next door co-worker. It helps if we can break down the silos. If you think of it, your heart is integrated with the entirety of your human being. Therefore, the employee needs to be integrated in exactly the same manner throughout the sinews of the corporation. And in order to do that, there has to be, of course, open communication, open recognition, and open support. One of the things that can happen with the heart is that when it gets into a time of heart failure, we all know of all the sort of Hollywood style of bells ringing and ambulances flying around and so on, and all the medical attentions that are necessary. So what we also have to understand is that when the heart does fail, the physical disruption, the physical costs are fantastic. So putting it another way, respecting, dignifying, building up the capacity of the employee is, of course, a very powerful way of avoiding that kind of risk. All of this comes down to the central point, that the heart is the central issue, the central organ of not only the human being, but therefore, but of the organization. I've got one more comment to make. We sometimes hear that expression, yes, he or she is the heart and soul of the organization, or that individual gave their heart and soul to a project. And it brings up a nice allegory or a nice analogy, really, doesn't it? And that is that if the heart is performing the way we would like it to perform, what an amazing add-on that when we say heart and soul, because heart and soul is rather like saying the employee with the full acquiescence of the board of directors, which is the soul of the organization, are working well together. And that working well together, the glue to that arrangement between the employee and the board of directors is, of course, the chief executive officer. And if the chief executive officer then is reporting to the board, that's the accountability, and then exercising those policy interests to the employee body, then we can all say this organization is coordinating in body, mind, and soul. What an incredibly powerful allegory, powerful metaphor for an organization that is successful, can weather the storms, and can be innovative, breed the styles of loyalty, breed also the idea that the prosperity is here to stay. So keeping the heart in good shape makes complete sense. Keeping the employee in good shape makes sense. On that, I rest my case.